Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
So thank you all again for being here. Happy Sunday. Here we are now in the last part of April. Title of my talk today, and then the fear lessened. So I'm cueing in on events that happened in our country, the United States of America, in my country, the United States of America. Some of you are in other countries. So on Monday of this week, which was April 18th, a federal judge from the state of Florida, Judge Catherine Mizell, declared, because of a lawsuit that she was over, that the CDC mask mandate for public transportation was illegal. And right after she did that, then the CDC and the administration said that they would not enforce the mandate while they figured out what the next thing to do was, while they considered their options. And then something kind of unusual happened that I didn't quite expect. Immediately, within 24 hours, all the major airlines had jumped on this and had announced that they would have no more mask mandates on any of their flights. Uber and Lyft also announced no more mask mandates for riders or passengers. Amtrak said no more mask mandate for passengers or crew on their train. So it spread and was accepted by all the major carriers. And the truth was that I know at least the airlines had been lobbying the government, the Biden administration, to drop the mask mandate. Anyway, the mandates actually were scheduled to drop actually on that day, on Monday, April 18th. But the week before, they had been extended into May. And so on the day that they might have been dropped, had they not been extended, the federal judge declared that they were illegal. And I read a little bit of the judge's decision. It's really kind of fascinating. It's very involved legally. You know, it's a 59-page decision. I certainly didn't read all of it, but it's very interesting for those who might be interested in for what reason was she declaring this mandate illegal. Okay, so then also something else really interesting happened that I didn't expect. It's the airlines seemed so eager and happy about this that they actually announced it and transmitted it to their crews of the planes that were actually in the air. You know, I figured, okay, if you're in the air, you're in the air, but it would probably take effect with the new flights. But no, they actually announced it. Over loudspeakers, flight attendants announced it and told people that they could take their masks off. And communication being what it is these days, you know, and everybody has little video cameras on their phones, a lot of people videoed these announcements and everybody taking their masks off. And they were mostly really, really happy. Now, not everybody was happy, and a few people kept their masks on. I do want to acknowledge that. But by far the majority of the people took their masks off and were very, very happy. I mean, you just feel the happiness. It's infectious. And the happiest of all were the flight attendants. They were really happy. I saw one video of a flight attendant, an African-American guy, going through the aisle of the plane singing, just spontaneously, something like, oh, no more masks, no more masks. And he had his little trash thing, and people were throwing their masks in the trash. It was really kind of a very interesting phenomena to watch. I was a little surprised. and then happily surprised. I mean, the truth is that it was all primed to happen. The airlines had wanted it to happen. The crews had wanted it to happen. And then in the moment when it actually did happen, it was a happy, jubilant thing for them to experience, at least for the majority of them. Again, not every single person. And this all happened within 24 hours of the federal judge, Catherine Mizell, declaring that the CDC and the government mandate on public transportation was actually illegal. Okay, that next day, on Tuesday, I went into the Castro neighborhood, which is the neighborhood that is closest to where I live in San Francisco. It's the gay neighborhood. And I definitely noticed that many, many more people were maskless. This is the first time I'd say, a vast majority of the people were maskless. Maybe 80% of the people did not have masks on. And I just felt this feeling of fear lessening. I don't talk too much about, the woo-woo stuff and my connection to energies because, I don't know, I'm just not guided to, but I do connect to energies, and I could just feel in the air the fear level of our society. I think the whole country just ratcheted down. That people were less fearful, and people were more joyful, and people were more alive. And I definitely felt that as I walked through the Castro. And one of the things I remember, and this was in the reading that Reverend Dussel-Thea read, it says, the only thing that is required for a healing is a lack of fear. The fearful are not healed and cannot heal. So this ratcheting of fear down is a really good thing because it means more people will heal. And that is what is required to heal. This lessening of fear is the requirement for healing. And then something happened in the Castro as I was walking down the street that has not happened to me in about 2 years since the whole mask thing happened. Was a man flirted with me. Somebody who was sitting outside in a little restaurant. He was trying to catch my eye. Older gentleman. I think he was attracted to the collar, kind of like forbidden fruit or something. It has a certain appeal. I don't know. But he flirted with me. And he flirted with me when I was walking up the street, and then he flirted with me as I was walking back down the street. And I hadn't had that happen in a really long time. And I felt, life is happening here in the Castro to a greater degree. And of course, you kind of need your whole face to flirt. I mean, you can maybe do it just with your eyes, but it's really hard. You need, all your facial expressions in order to do it. Now, I will acknowledge that not everybody is happy about this. Some people don't think it's a good thing that the mask mandate has been dropped. Some people are working to reestablish a mask mandate on public transportation. And of course, people can still wear masks on public transportation if they want to. Some people have told me, airlines, they're still a dangerous place, airplanes, and you could still, catch COVID on an airplane. A lot of people put together, all in a very small place. And I read something about that. I mean, mask mandates might actually be effective on airlines if you had to wear the mask, a good, N95 mask, the whole time you were on the plane. But they allow people to take them off to eat and drink. And somebody was comparing that. That's like you're on a submarine that's got 5 doors and you're diving underwater and you only close 3 of the doors. If you leave 2 of the doors open, how effective is it going to be? So if we were really going to have an effective mask mandate on airplanes, it would have to be for the whole time everybody is on a plane, and they'd have to be wearing really good masks and properly, and they'd have to keep them on the whole time. But if you allow people to take them off while you eat and drink, and believe me, people can nurse eating and drinking a real long time if you don't want to put your mask back on. There was a mask mandate on the plane, but it was not a very good one. It was like having that submarine with 5 doors, but you only shut 3 of them. two open ones, water still gets in. So, there's that to think about. The other thing about, and I talked about this a lot, and I get flack about it, I know, and it's not really popular. I understand that. But I've always had a problem and an issue with masks because it's a nonverbal communication that we're giving to each other in society, that there's danger out there and that I might be dangerous to you and you might be dangerous to me. It's a communication of danger back and forth to each other. It's something we do to defend ourselves and to defend other people. Course in Miracles says, no one walks the world in armature, but must have terror striking at his heart. So this defensive thing of wearing masks, it just speaks to the fear that we all have. And it communicates fear. And fear is sickening. It makes us sick. As I said earlier, the only thing required for a healing is a lack of fear. And I was so glad to see so many people so happy and willing to take those masks off in the airplane as soon as it was announced, because it showed me that a lot of people were ready and maybe already had let the fear go, but they were only wearing the mask because they were being forced to, because they had to. So it was a real demonstration of freedom. Again, if people want to wear a mask while they're on the plane, of course they can wear them. And they can wear them the whole time they're on the plane if they really want to feel safer. And don't eat and drink while you're on a plane. Keep the mask on for the whole flight. This idea of a dangerous world and the problem of continually communicating that is it's a theme that I have been on and that I have been talking about for many, many years. It didn't start with COVID. I think the first time I gave a talk about safe was probably 10 years ago, when I really noticed that the expression "have a safe trip" had totally usurped any other thing you say to somebody when they're about ready to go on a vacation. We used to say, "Have a great trip," or "Have a fun trip," and it became "Have a safe trip." And it started to, bother me in a way, not in a real negative way, but I just saw that, what is it that we're trying to communicate to people? We're trying to communicate to people that the world's a dangerous place. And is the world really a dangerous place? Possibly the mind is a dangerous thing, but the world's just a reflection of the mind. And I don't live like the world is a dangerous place. And I certainly don't travel to be safe. I travel to have a great, fun time. So I always tell people, don't tell me to be safe or to have a safe trip. Tell me to have a fun trip. Tell me to have a great trip, because that's why I'm traveling. If I really wanted to be safe, I'd probably stay at home. I don't think I'd be traveling. Traveling is risky, but I do a risk assessment and I decide that I'll take that risk. So I travel to have a fun trip and a great trip. And this telling people to have a safe trip is really kind of a curse. It's cursing people with the idea that the world is a dangerous place, and it's a place that we have to be hyper-vigilant about all the time to protect ourselves, because we are so vulnerable in the midst of all these dangers that we have to be continually aware of safety. And the Course says, are thoughts then dangerous to bodies? Yes. The thoughts that seem to kill are those which teach the thinker that he can be killed, and so he dies because of what he learned. In other words, we go through sickness experiences, we go through death experiences because of what we have learned. And if we are continually teaching people back and forth that the world is dangerous, and we do this when we tell them to be safe, then it's deadly. It's really deadly. I know we kind of make it like it's the loving thing to do, but I really see that it's a very deadly thing. And I'm not going to curse anybody with deadly energy. I'm going to tell people to have fun and have a great time and be comfortable. Their safety comes from their divine connection to the infinite. Over the past couple of weeks, I've become aware of a psychiatrist who's named Dr. Mark McDonald, and he has a new book out called The United States of Fear. And in this book, he talks about our addiction. He calls it an addiction, our addiction to fear in our country, and how this has become so predominant and how it really got ramped up during the whole COVID pandemic. And he uses, again, that addiction model as his framework. And one of the things he says is, when you realize that you've got an addiction, let's say you're addicted to alcohol, you get the whiskey out of the house. I mean, you just take the wine and the whiskey and the beer, and you don't have it lying around. So when you realize you have a fear addiction, he says, you got to get the source of the fear out of the house. And he goes, and the source of the fear is the media. He goes, especially the mainstream television media. And he goes, all the channels, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, whichever one you're watching, they communicate a whole lot of fear. So when you realize that your mind has now gotten hooked into fear, and you're hooked into fear, if you're telling people to be safe, you got to get the source of the fear out of your space. You got to take the whiskey out of the house. You got to stop watching those mainstream media outlets. I remember after the 2016 election, was that the one when Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were running? So after that election, and Donald Trump won to the surprise of most in the mainstream media, I used to watch a lot of that stuff, and I liked watching it, and I liked MSNBC, and I saw that the day after the election, they had switched into full panic mode, and they were just preaching fear. The world, society was going to come to an end because Donald Trump had won the election. And I got it, like, okay, that's an opinion, but I don't need to watch this because it's just fear. And I don't want to watch anything that is just, I don't go to horror movies because, I have no reason to be just scared like that. And I'm not going to watch the horror movie that's called mainstream media news because it's just another horror movie. In the beginning of the pandemic, as everybody was kind of, wondering what the hell was going on, I got tuned in to one of the popular Jesus channelers that we have in our community right now. It's Tina Louise Spalding. So Tina Louise Spalding very dramatically channels Jesus. And it's kind of interesting to watch. I'm not going to make any bold statements about it, whether I think it's 100% accurate or not. But I did watch some of the Jesus channelings when, especially right at the beginning of the pandemic, when Jesus was talking about the pandemic. And, this is when we thought we were just going to be sheltering in place for 3 weeks. 15 days to flatten the curve. In San Francisco, it was 3 weeks. They never told us 15 days. They told us 3 weeks. But then Tina Louise Spalding and Jesus speaking through Tina Louise Spalding was a little disturbing because, for one, Jesus was implying that this was going to go on a whole lot longer than 3 weeks, and I didn't want to hear that. And Jesus was implying that there were going to be some real serious implications about this, and that we were really going to have to center in on our faith and our guidance and our belief that we were safe and protected because of our spiritual connection, not because of anything we would do out there in the world. And then Jesus told everybody, stop watching the news. It was very clear about it. Stop watching the news. So Jesus was saying the same thing that this doctor, Mark McDonald, is now saying, the psychiatrist. Stop watching the news. It is just the fear 24/7. Another thing that's interesting, and you can accept or reject, everybody's got different hits about this. So, because he uses the addiction model in talking about how we handled the pandemic and how we're just continually perpetuating the fear, he says that the healing of this is the same way that the 12-step program heals people from addiction. He goes, the first thing is you got to admit that you're powerless over this fear, that this fear is causing terrible consequences in your life and you're powerless over it. And he talked about a little internet meme that he's seen, and it's funny. It's like a person who's got like a whole bunch of test swabs stuck up their nose, and they're all hanging out of this person's nose. And this person says, "It's my 18th negative test this week, and I could quit anytime." Says, and I think that's how we are. Now they're going to make it possible so that everybody can order home tests so that you can continually test yourself to see if you test positive, to continually see whether there's something to be afraid of. And you tell yourself that you can quit anytime, but can you? Can you stop wearing the mask anytime? Or do you still think it's probably best to wear it? Even on a plane, when they allow people to take them off while they eat and drink, which is about half the time they're on the plane anyway. I mean, think about it. Does this really make much sense? But how addicted are we to these symbols? How much fear do we keep bringing into our lives? He continues, this psychiatrist, Dr. Mark McDonald, connecting how we handled the pandemic to a fear addiction. And he says, we also have to admit that because of this addiction, we've harmed people. And we have to be aware of how we've harmed people. And we have to be honest about it, own up to it, admit it, and then we have to make amends, just like they talk about in a 12-step program. So, I remember, he goes, there's people who were having weddings, and before you got your wedding invitation, you had to show them your proof of vaccination. If you didn't show them your proof of vaccination, you wouldn't get an invitation to their wedding. And he says families have harmed other family members by doing things of this nature. He says you have to understand how you've harmed these relationships, and you have to be willing to own up to it and make amends about it. Last year, I was disinvited to a 4th of July party from one of my oldest friends, and I have gone to his 4th of July party every year for decades, and it's held outdoors. But I was disinvited because I wasn't vaccinated. And, I can handle these things, but, I think about it, and we have to be willing to see that we've caused harm to our relationships by some of these things that we have done. Last year when I was back east visiting my family, I wanted to go see my 90-year-old aunt and uncle, who I don't know how much longer they're going to be around and how many more opportunities I will have to see them. And I love them. I've had a lot of wonderful family experiences with them for my whole life. But I wasn't allowed. Their children wouldn't allow me to go see them because I wasn't vaccinated. And other cousins and other family members who were vaccinated could go see them. And that's the illusion that it's only the unvaccinated that are spreading this disease. But as we've found out now, especially because of the big wave of infection that happened this past January, the vaccinated get ill, and the vaccinated spread the virus just as much as the unvaccinated do. And so it really doesn't make any sense to restrict the unvaccinated because the vaccinated are spreading the disease. Honestly, last January, I caught COVID. And I probably caught COVID because my roommate, who's here, Reverend Peter, who's a fully vaccinated person, got COVID and came into the house and the apartment, and I caught it. A couple days later, I started manifesting symptoms. Now, I don't know for sure. I got it from my apartment mate, but, it's probably pretty likely, and it's fine. That's the way things happen. It didn't anger me, and it was, hard, but I got through it. But, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, if you believe in the disease model, both spread it. So it doesn't really make any sense to restrict things to the vaccinated. I would have been very happy to see my aunt and uncle if we met outdoors and stayed 6 feet apart from each other, 8 feet apart from each other, and I wore a mask. But no, none of that was allowed. So these are the harms that we have done to our familiar relationships. And these are the things that we need to own up to and acknowledge and make amends for if we're going to heal from our addiction to fear and these rituals that we do because of the fear that don't make a whole lot of sense. Masks on plane, when you allow people to take the masks off half the time, do not make a whole lot of sense. And having this idea that unvaccinated people are more risky than vaccinated people, when it's really clear the vaccinated people spread the virus just as much, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's only our addiction to fear that keeps these things going, and we have to be willing to let go. One more thing that this psychiatrist talks about, he goes, the terrible consequences that this fear addiction has had on our children. And this is really well documented now. The children, the young children, have suffered tremendously under the pandemic and all the mitigation strategies. The mental health of the children is terrible. The suicides among young people are at an all-time high. Suicide ideation, even if they don't go through with the suicide, at an all-time high. Self-harming, where young people burn themselves with cigarette butts or use razor blades to make little dashes in their skin. Again, these things are through the roof. Even the CDC has published papers on how terrible the spike in the mental health issues for young people is. There's also been studies that show that young people, even younger people, young children who were developing during the height of the pandemic, their IQ is now 20 points lower than equal age children were before the pandemic. So all those masks, not having schooling, is actually brain damage. You not really thought that you regain IQ after you've lost it. So we've caused all these harms because of our addiction to fear. And the one thing that the psychiatrist really wanted to point out, that this was the first time in the history of civilization that we sacrificed our children in order to protect the adults. Because everybody knew that the children weren't really at much risk of having any serious harm from the disease, COVID, but we wanted to do all these things for them, and we kept them out of schools, and now we're vaccinating them even at the age of 5, not to protect them as much as to protect their parents or their grandparents. And he says this is the first time in the history of civilization that we've held our children up to shield the adults. He goes, the adults are supposed to be the shield for the children. That's the social contract. He goes, if we're to the place where we're using the children to shield the adults, he goes, that's a terrible thing. And that's an indication of a civilization in decline. So it was something to think about. We're giving children experimental biological agents that we know now have serious side effects with myocarditis and all kinds of things. Yeah, the majority of people won't have those, but a very high number of adverse harms do come from some of these vaccines that were given to children who have no real risk of getting seriously ill, and we're doing it not to protect the children, but to protect their parents. And that's what our addiction to fear has caused. So, yeah, I was happy when they announced on those planes, and I was happy to see everybody take their masks off. And I was happy that I felt a reduction in the fear level in our country. And I was happy that somebody flirted with me and that life was getting back to a joyful, playful level. And I want to look at what the psychiatrist says. If we're addicted to fear in our culture, then we have to admit it. We have to see the problem. And the problem is in that saying, stay safe. We have to see it. We have to feel it. We have to admit our powerlessness over it. We have to admit the harms we have caused because of it. And we have to make amends. And the time to start is now. Now that the fear is ratcheting down. Now that we can say the fear is lessening. Now is the time to heal. That's my talk for today. Thank you for
Nel
listening.
nome di Padre, Figliolo,
Amen.
Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Have you been lonely? Have you been sad? How does it feel to lose such a close one? Have you been mad?